Somewhere in the darkness over eastern Ukraine last night, a drone found its target. A Russian electronic warfare station, one of the most sophisticated jamming systems on the battlefield, capable of blinding Ukrainian communications across entire frontline sectors, reduced to burning metal in a field outside Donetsk. A warehouse, an ammunition depot, gone. 3 years ago, that strike would have led every newscast on Earth. Analysts would have spent hours dissecting the implications. Politicians would have issued statements. The world would have watched. Last night, almost nobody noticed. Because the world is watching Iran. The split screen of global attention is brutal and revealing. On one side, missile strikes, geopolitical brinkmanship, the specter of a regional war that could reshape the Middle East and send oil prices into the stratosphere. On the other side, Ukraine, still fighting, still dying, still launching drones into Russian territory every single night, still holding a front line that stretches for over 1,000 kilometers across some of the most contested ground on Earth. But the cameras have moved. The front pages have changed. The diplomatic energy that once flowed toward Kyiv is now consumed by Tehran, by the Strait of Hormuz, by the question of whether American boots will touch Iranian soil. And in that shifting of attention, that slow, almost invisible reallocation of the world's focus, something consequential is happening to Ukraine's war. Something that the Ukrainians understand with painful clarity, even if the rest of the world has stopped paying attention long enough to notice. Wars are not won only on the battlefield. They are won in the newspapers, in the budget committees, in the alliance meetings, in the sustained political will of the nations that have chosen a side. And right now, Ukraine is losing the attention war. There is a concept in geopolitics called alliance fatigue. It describes the moment when the nations supporting a conflict begin to quietly recalculate whether the cost of continued engagement is worth the benefit. When the initial moral clarity that drove intervention starts to blur under the weight of years, of competing priorities, of domestic pressures that make foreign wars feel less urgent than the problems at home. Alliance fatigue destroyed the League of Nations. It hollowed out Western support for South Vietnam. It ended the international appetite for nation-building in Afghanistan long before the last helicopter left Kabul. And right now, it is stalking Ukraine. Not openly, not honestly. The speeches still come. The commitments to sovereignty, the pledges of support for as long as it takes. But beneath the speeches, the mathematics are shifting. Military aid packages that once moved through Western legislatures in weeks now take months. Ammunition production targets that were announced with fanfare have been quietly missed. The political leaders who championed Ukraine's cause most loudly are navigating domestic electorates that are increasingly focused on their own economic anxieties. Anxieties that the Iran crisis is now dramatically amplifying. At the same moment that Ukraine needs the world's attention most, as Russia has rebuilt its military capacity and is pressing along multiple frontline sectors, the world has found a new crisis to absorb it. This is not an accident of timing. The intersection of the Iran conflict and the Ukraine war is not just a coincidence of the news cycle. It is a geopolitical realignment with profound consequences for both conflicts and for the broader international order that has governed the world since 1945. To understand what is happening to Ukraine right now, you have to understand how attention, resources, and political will work in a world of multiple, simultaneous crises. And you have to understand what Russia knows and is counting on. Let's start with what is actually happening in Ukraine right now, because the absence of coverage does not mean the absence of war. Ukraine's front line stretches over 1,000 kilometers, from the Kharkiv region in the northeast down through the Zaporizhia Oblast to Kherson in the south. Along that entire line, contact is continuous. Artillery, drones, infantry assaults, every single day. The tempo of fighting has not decreased because the world stopped watching. If anything, it has intensified. Russia has adapted. The catastrophic losses of the early war, the failed assault on Kyiv, the Kharkiv counteroffensive that humiliated Russian forces, the sinking of the Moskva, taught Moscow brutal lessons about the cost of ambition outrunning capability. Russia has since settled into a grinding war of attrition. Slowly, expensively, at enormous human cost, it has been pushing forward along several axes, near Avdiivka, near Kupiansk, near Vuhledar. The advances are measured in kilometers per month, sometimes per season. But they are advances. Ukraine's problem is one of arithmetic. Russia has a population of 144 million. Ukraine has 44 million. And millions of those have fled abroad. Russia's defense industry has shifted to full wartime production, churning out artillery shells, drones, and armored vehicles at rates that dwarf what Ukraine's Western partners are providing. North Korea has supplied Russia with over 1 million artillery shells. Iran? The same Iran, now under missile attack from the United States and Israel, has supplied Russia with Shahed drones that have been used to devastate Ukrainian infrastructure. And Ukraine? Ukraine is running short. Not of will. The courage of Ukrainian forces has been one of the most remarkable military stories of the modern era. But of ammunition, of air defense interceptors, of the artillery shells that make the difference between holding a line and losing it. The overnight drone strike on Russian electronic warfare systems in Donetsk is not just a tactical operation. It is Ukraine doing what it has done throughout this war, innovating, adapting, finding asymmetric ways to compensate for the conventional advantages it lacks. Ukrainian drone warfare has become one of the most sophisticated in the world. Ukraine has struck targets inside Russia, oil refineries, military bases, radar installations, at ranges that would have seemed impossible in 2022. But innovation has limits when resources are finite. And right now, the resources are getting harder to secure. Here is the direct, concrete, uncomfortable connection between the Iran conflict and Ukraine's war. It is about weapons. Specifically, it is about the weapons that do both jobs, that are needed in both theaters simultaneously, and that the United States and its allies do not have in unlimited supply. Air defense interceptors are the most critical example. Ukraine's survival, the literal survival of its cities, its power grid, its civilian population, depends on air defense systems capable of shooting down Russian missiles and drones. The Patriot missile system is the gold standard. Ukraine has a small number of Patriot batteries, each one irreplaceable, each one requiring a constant supply of interceptor missiles that cost over $3 million each. The same Patriot systems, the same interceptor missiles, now desperately needed in the Middle East, where American bases, Israeli cities, and Gulf state infrastructure are under threat from Iranian ballistic missiles. There is one production line, one supply chain, one finite pool of the most advanced air defense munitions in the world. And suddenly, there are two wars competing for them. This is not a hypothetical. American officials have already made decisions, some public, most not, about the allocation of military resources between Ukraine and the Middle East. Every Patriot interceptor sent to defend a base in the Gulf is an interceptor not defending Kyiv. Every precision-guided munition committed to the Iran campaign is a munition not in a Ukrainian weapons package. The same logic applies to intelligence assets, satellites, signals intelligence, analyst time, and to the diplomatic bandwidth of senior American officials who can only attend so many meetings, make so many phone calls, sustain so many simultaneous crises at maximum intensity. Ukraine understood this risk before anyone else. Ukrainian officials warned for months that a wider Middle East conflict would drain Western attention and resources from their war. They were right. And the speed with which it happened, the almost overnight shift in global focus, has been even more dramatic than they feared. Vladimir Putin has been handed something he could not have engineered himself: a simultaneous crisis in the Middle East. Western military resources stretched across two theaters. American political attention consumed by the question of Iran. European leaders trying to manage energy security, immigration pressures, domestic political instability, and alliance commitments all at once. And Ukraine, the conflict that was supposed to define the West's commitment to the post-Cold War order, sliding down the priority list. Russia's strategy since the failure of its initial blitzkrieg has been explicitly built around one assumption: that Western support for Ukraine is not unlimited, and that time favors Moscow. Russia can absorb losses, human and material, at a scale that democratic publics in the West cannot politically sustain. Russia's economy, while damaged by sanctions, has adapted. Its defense industry is producing. Its manpower, drawn from a population of 144 million and supplemented by North Korean troops and Wagner-affiliated fighters, has not been exhausted. Putin's bet has always been that the West will eventually tire, that the moral clarity of 2022, the near universal condemnation of Russia's invasion, the extraordinary mobilization of Western support, will erode under the weight of time and competing priorities. The Iran crisis has accelerated that bet's potential payoff by years. Russian state media, which has become an important source of analysis for how Moscow reads the geopolitical moment, has covered the Iran conflict with barely concealed satisfaction. The framing is consistent. America is overstretched. The West is distracted. Ukraine has been abandoned by the allies it trusted. Come to the negotiating table before it gets worse. It is propaganda, but it is propaganda with a factual foundation that is harder to dismiss than it was 6 months ago. If the United States is distracted, Europe is caught in something worse. The European nations that have been Ukraine's most consistent supporters, Poland, the Baltic states, Germany, France, the UK, are now simultaneously managing the consequences of the Iran conflict in ways that directly affect their domestic politics and economic stability. Oil at $100 a barrel is not an abstraction in Europe. It is heating bills, trucking costs, food prices, manufacturing costs. It is the kind of economic pressure that makes electorates angry and governments cautious. The same European politicians who championed Ukraine's cause are now fielding questions from voters about energy costs, about inflation, about why their country is spending billions on a foreign war when people at home are struggling. The timing could not be more damaging for Ukraine. European defense production, which was already struggling to meet the promises made to Ukraine, is now under additional pressure. Several European nations have quietly increased their own strategic stockpiles in response to the deteriorating security environment in the Middle East, diverting production capacity that was earmarked for Ukrainian weapons packages. And European political coherence, never easy to maintain across 27 nations with different histories, different threat perceptions, and different domestic political pressures, is fraying. Hungary under Viktor Orban has been a consistent obstacle to EU unity on Ukraine. But now there are softer voices in other capitals, voices that aren't Orban, that can't be dismissed as pro-Russian, quietly asking whether a negotiated settlement in Ukraine might free up resources and attention for the more immediate crisis in the Middle East. Ukraine's supporters call this appeasement. Ukraine's exhausted diplomats call it betrayal. But the voices asking the question are growing, and they are coming from places that cannot be easily ignored. Here is what makes Ukraine's position both desperate and remarkable. They know all of this. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his advisors understand the geopolitical moment with the unsentimental clarity of people whose survival depends on reading it correctly. They have watched the cameras move. They have felt the diplomatic energy shift. They have sat in meetings where the questions about Ukraine come after the questions about Iran, and where the answers feel a little less urgent than they used to. And they are fighting anyway. The overnight drone strikes on Russian electronic warfare stations are not just tactical operations. They are political statements. They are Ukraine saying to the world, "We are still here. We are still fighting. We are still winning where we can. Do not write us off." Ukraine's drone program, arguably the most innovative military technology development story of the decade, has become a strategic communication tool as much as a battlefield weapon. Every successful long-range strike inside Russia makes news, even in a world distracted by Iran. Every destroyed Russian asset reminds Western capitals that Ukraine is an active, capable, forward-leaning military partner, not a passive recipient of aid waiting to be rescued. But innovation and will cannot substitute indefinitely for resources and attention. The arithmetic of the front line is unforgiving, and the window in which Ukraine can sustain its current posture without a significant resupply of air defense munitions and artillery ammunition is not unlimited. The question that Zelensky's team is asking, in every meeting, in every phone call, in every public statement calibrated to keep Ukraine on the agenda of a distracted world, is how long the window stays open, and whether the world will come back before it closes. Because wars, once lost in the attention economy, are very hard to win back. The political will that sustains them is fragile. The coalitions that enable them are difficult to rebuild once they fracture. And the lesson of history, from Vietnam to Afghanistan to a dozen conflicts that the world watched intensely and then forgot, is that the moment a war slips from the front page to the second section, the trajectory has already begun to change. Ukraine knows this. Russia knows this. The only question is whether the rest of the world knows it too, before it's too late to matter.